It's time for an exciting new LEGO build, which we'll be working on alongside our main project, the LEGO City. But this time we're recreating ancient Rome. So today we're kicking things off with the Forum Romanum, the heart of the city, which is basically the public square. And just to clarify up front, this won't be a direct one-to-one replica of Rome. Instead, we're creating a city that could have existed somewhere in the Roman Empire back at that time. This simply gives us more creative freedom and is much more practical in terms of scale. Instead of strictly following historic layouts, we can now freely decide where to place certain buildings, temples, and other structures. And with that in mind, just wanted to have that said, let's get started. Now, before filling in more of the main square, we'll begin with the first temple. And of course, as always, you can decide what role this temple should play. Ancient Rome had a vast number of gods, which were mainly just directly copied from the Greeks, but that's another topic. For now, to kick things off, I decided that this temple is dedicated to Neptune, but we can simply switch that at any time since most of the temples have a similar architectural design from the outside, and therefore I'd say let's focus more on that. Something interesting you'll notice at first is that we were quite hesitant to use much color in the early buildings, so this first structure is very white. However, in reality, Roman buildings, especially statues and temples, were often painted in certain areas. So we'll slowly experiment and see what works. The key is to find the balance so that the city doesn't look too chaotic with too much color, but right now we have the opposite problem basically. Everything is a bit too plain. Now let's move on to the decorations under the roofline. Since this temple is dedicated to Neptune, the god of the sea, I thought shells would be a great ornamental element. In the center, we now had another statue that mirrors the exact same from the inside. For some decorative elements, I even used minifigure legs in this case, which worked surprisingly well. The first hint of color now comes in form of golden decorative accents, which immediately gave the temple the right amount of life. Of course, I'll try to increase the color in the next buildings as well, but in combination with the roof, which has this medium nougat color, I really like the warmth the building now has. Still, I figured we could make the scene feel a bit more alive by adding some greenery, specifically 2 cypress trees on either side. These trees are perfect for Rome's climate, so I'll definitely use more of them throughout the rest of the build. And now, whether this is historically accurate or not, I've also placed 2 guards right in front of the temple just to see how they fit into the overall composition at the time. Another important step is checking the proportions of open spaces versus buildings. The square, for example, shouldn't feel too empty and big, even though in real life the Forum Romanum was much larger than what we're building here. It's all about making sure the layout works as a Lego model. For the next facade, I decided to incorporate some sand green bricks. This will be for a slightly elongated temple on the side, and as for its function, this is once again entirely up to you. I haven't added an interior so far. The facade is designed in this sort of 2-layer structure, the main wall at the back and then the columns in front, which I think creates a nice depth effect. Moving on, you might have already noticed this strange platform in the middle of the forum. This is called the rostra, which is named after the Latin word rostrum, which originally referred to the prow of the ship. The Romans would attach prows of captured enemy ships to these platforms as a form of trophy, hence the name rostra. The platform itself was mainly used as a speaker's podium, and of course we'll also add minifigures later, which is probably the most important feature here overall. In front of the rostra, I've placed a large central statue featuring a white horse to show some illegal building techniques. Instead of just giving you a history lesson, I erased the printed eye detail on the horse to make it look like a marble statue rather than a living animal. On the sides of the forum, you'll also notice taller columns, and this time I even experimented with more color. Dark red and gold, for example, complement each other beautifully, so I'll definitely use this color combination in other parts of Rome as well. 2 more cypress trees to frame the scene, and in front of them you'll see a small, sort of box-like structure. This represents the Temple of Janus, the smallest temple in ancient Rome. Its doors were only then closed when there was peace across the entire Roman Empire, which was actually quite rare, as you can imagine. So I then decided, since it looked better this way, not to include any doors at all. Just so you get an idea of the different features and functions of each building we're currently placing. Here in this corner section at the far end of the forum, I wanted to experiment with more greenery. So in this case, I used a barrel, inserted several of these flex tubes. then also wrapped a lasso around it to create a sort of vine effect, and then with the last flex tube I now add to the barrel. It secures the entire structure, so no extra support is needed. These flex tubes are simply great for achieving organic shapes, and I'll most likely use this technique in other parts of the mock as well. I also experimented with brown cables to wrap around the flex tubes as more vines to add even more texture. The leaves are attached using our standard limb elements, and this is of course quite a time-consuming process, but the end result is a fantastic looking tree if you ask me. The downside now only is that the base of the tree is a visible barrel, which of course has to be hidden inside a decorative planter around it. And as the barrel is now finally hidden, this last touch of green really completes the forum beautifully, and we can focus on another corner. In between the two buildings we have already built, I decided to add another much smaller temple in this case. Building technique wise, I decided to add the walls in between the columns. So I used jumper plates to achieve this half stud offset, and color wise you can also see that I really fell in love with this dark red gold color combination, and therefore I decided to make use of that right away for this temple as well. The temple of course once again has quite a similar design, which in fact is also quite realistic. I'm currently a bit unsure if I want to add medium nougat to every single roof of our ancient Rome mock, although it was quite realistic. But you can let me know your thoughts on that down in the comment section, and also what the function of this temple is supposed to be. Next up, it's time to bring life to the forum. Of course, we can now use simply these medieval minifigures, and on the other side, this is a bit more expensive, a mixture of Star Wars torsos as well as Ninjago figures. Of course, there are also the specific Centurios as well as the Legionnaires LEGO has released as collective series, but each minifigure right there costs about 30 euros, so this is incredibly expensive. And also the majority of the population in Rome itself was of course peaceful, and therefore this is also what we're focusing on now. For example, right there at the rostra, we have one guy currently holding a speech. The only problem is that we don't have any studs to secure the minifigure, so this is a bit annoying of course. And now, since I can imagine that it's always quite difficult for you as a viewer to sort of envision how the project is going to look like in future, this is now supposed to be the follow-up project of the pirate world I built together with two good friends of mine, Rudy and Willy, and this of course means we can once again work much faster than in the LEGO city. And therefore, for the planning of the layout, the entire layout currently consists out of 150 32 by 32 base plates. At least that's our current layout we've planned, with room for expansion. The entire model will be divided into two sections by a river passing through the middle. On the left hand side we have this more rural area with some hills in the background, and then on the right hand side this is where we want to build the city itself, with of course a road leading into the city, crossing a bridge, and then in the background we want to have a giant aqueduct. This of course can't be missing at all. For the city itself we want to add some sort of Colosseum in the background. We're currently working on that already, and then a ton of buildings, not only temples but also residential buildings of course for the city itself. We also want to add a harbor right in front at the sea, and this also now is why I was talking about we won't be building an exact replica of Rome, because as you hopefully know, Rome isn't located directly at the sea, and therefore we decided to build some city that could have existed back in the ancient Roman Empire. And now, so you get a feeling of what we've started building today, this little section in the center I've marked right there, this is what we've started off with today, and now I think you can imagine how big this entire project is going to be. One other thing we decided to try out for this project is a different building technique when it comes to the base structure. This will be much more expensive than using normal base plates, because we're now using 4 16 stud plates and then another layer of once again 4 16 stud plates on top of them. So this resulting of course in the 32 stud by 32 stud base plate foundation. The reason for that being landscaping, but I think I'm going to go into detail when it comes to this technique and the idea behind that in another video. For now I'd say that's it for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed this opening episode of Building Ancient Rome, and I'll see you again in the next one.